Welcome to the Historic Preservation Commission meeting of May 12, 2022. I will call roll with each commission member answering present. John Allison.
Here. Present.
Rebecca Poole Burns. Dodie Hall.
Present.
Barbara Kelly.
Present.
Bill Stone.
Present.
Jacob Woods.
Present.
I'm Lynn Shupert, and we have a quorum present. Dr. Swope is the city's preservation specialist. Thank you to everyone who's attending today. Your involvement in this commission's proceedings is vital to the effectiveness of this process. There is a copy of the agenda out front if you would like one. Historic designation means your neighborhoods have been recognized by the United States government, the state of Alabama, and the city of Decatur as being architecturally or historically significant to our community. Historic districts are not created to prevent changes, but rather to ensure that the proposed changes are appropriate to the individual property and the districts as a whole. The Commission's responsibility is to review the appropriateness of all proposed changes. Each historic resource within the district is assessed on its own individual merits. What's appropriate for one property may not be appropriate for another based on age, location, neighboring properties, and stylistic details. The Historic Preservation Commission's rulings are based on written standards and regulations that guide our review and decision making. These guidelines and the Commission's decisions have the force of city ordinance. You can access our guidelines along with the application forms on the city's website. Our hearing process is as follows. Staff will present the applications. When she reads your name and property address, please be prepared to come to the podium. Staff will present the application and staff assessment of each request. The staff assessment results from a review of the application from someone who exceeds federal qualifications as published in Title 36 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 61. When staff is finished presenting the application item, the applicant and/or a designated representative will then state his or her name and address and provide any additional information or comments regarding the application item. The Commission may ask clarifying questions of the applicant at this time. Next, we will hear any public comments on that particular application item only. After public comment has closed, the Commission will discuss and the Chair will entertain a motion and dispense with that application item. Staff will then proceed to the next application item and so forth. An approved certificate of appropriateness, or COA, will be issued in the form of an email that copies both the applicant and the building department, approximately 1 week after this hearing. The document will outline and reaffirm what was approved and that the project has met the guidelines of the Commission. A COA must be issued before a building permit can be obtained. If any changes to your project are anticipated after the COA is issued, it is the responsibility of the homeowner to contact staff and she will help guide you. In some cases, you may be required to submit the changes for review and issuance of a new COA. If your project is denied and you are not issued a COA, you will be issued a letter stating the reasons for denial and additional information. Denied COAs will be sent via certified mail to the property owner's address, filed with the Morgan County Revenue Commissioner's Office. You may resubmit an application with revised plans at a future meeting. There is an appeal process for a denied COA as well, which is spelled out in the municipal ordinance under sections 18-25 and 18-92. After all applications are heard, the Commission will entertain general comments from the public, limited to 3 minutes per individual. Okay. First on the agenda is approval of the April 14th minutes, 2020 minutes. Any discussion? Do I hear a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, Caroline?
All right. It is both National Historic Preservation Month, and Mayor Bowling has declared May as Historic Preservation Month in the city of Decatur as well. And so the Commission has historically recognized projects that have been finished and completed in the last year that they feel really exemplify the standards and the guidelines at a high level. So we have a number of people here tonight. The first is Miss Sandifer. She's at 701 Line in the Old Decatur District, and some of you might recognize this house because she's been working with us on additional stuff in the meantime. But it's really the front entry. This is how it looks now with that fabulous sort of early 20th century multi-light door. It's got these side lights. But that's not how it started out. It had like a storm door that wasn't fitting properly. Miss Sandiford actually started the process of removing it, and we sort of reached out to her and had a discussion about the appropriateness of that change in terms of removing a period door. And she went above and beyond. She was able to get the original door that had been removed, had it fixed, restored by a restoration carpenter, put back in. It is absolutely fabulous. It's really a showstopper when you walk down the street and you can see all the lights. And so that is our first award. And Commission Chair has it. Thank you. I'm going to get a photo of it. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for your work. And we look forward to seeing the next stage of the project.
Thank you so much.
So, and I think this is one that just really shows that something that looks sort of tired and worn, it's not the actual, it's the finish, not the actual door or window under it. Next up, 633 Sherman, Mr. and Miss Stokes, Albany District. This house had been sided. It was a conglomeration of an early Victorian house that had a post-World War II addition, and it had this really inappropriate metal siding that had been added at one point. And I have to say, it's really rare that we see people spend the resources to uncover historic siding. I mean, visually it makes a huge difference, but most people just don't want to open up a proverbial can of worms, and so they're just going to leave it because they don't want to know it's there. In this case, as they started to pull it off, these really nice details were uncovered. A much more narrow clapboard really showcased the district, and so and I love this picture because it shows that bay window so nicely. And so that really turned out quite nicely, and I think I saw Mr. Stokes here. There he is. And so Lynn actually has the award. And y'all have sold the house, you moved. You guys think, hey, that's what's supposed to happen.
Teresa would be here, but she's working on another house in Mountain.
Yeah, see,
right now.
you're in trouble now. Here, I'll get the two of you together. And so thank her. And is it another vintage house? She said
It's
it was
a
like
mid-century
a mid-century.
modern, she said.
That's a whole nother vocabulary. That means she'll need different furnishings for it. You're aware of that caveat, right? Okay. Next up is 426 Jackson, Ms. Waller. This is an Albany District house. I don't have a good photo of what the house looked like before, because from the street it just sort of looked like overgrown landscaping. But when I came up to issue the COA, the house really was a lot of deferred maintenance issues with it. They did a tremendous amount on the inside, but of course the commission just works with the outside. And there was a whole section just to the right of the front entry. The wall completely had to be redone, large sections of the porch, significant amount of rot. And carpenters went in, they did a fabulous job. It looks beautiful, new coat of paint, they cleared out the landscaping, and so the house really is starting to shine again, and I know she is. Yes, we're so excited, and it just sold too as well, correct? Yes. So, hot real estate market right now. Thank you both. Is this not? Oh, that went up wrong. Okay. This one is mine. Yeah. So this one was a large rehab. It had fallen into disrepair with various things living in it that weren't supposed to be in there. This one required a full foundation work in all systems, and there, on the outside, the biggest issue with this, it hadn't been painted, and there was it had reached the point where a lot of the boards were failing. So we had to find siding, had to have siding milled that matched the right profile, and then find a finished carpenter that you don't rip it all off, you have to insert it sort of one piece at a time. It's a little bit like a game of Jenga. So it worked really well. I looked out. It is exteriors finished, and some of you are aware it was a pattern book house. The little teeny front porch entry is not original to the house. It was added in like the 50s or the 60s, so if you take off the little entry with the American flag, you can see what it looked like when it was built. And that was the cover. It was a fun project. I'm done for a while. I'm hiding my camera. And I'm glad it's back in service again. And this house was built for the manager of Connecticut Mills, which is now Hyosung. So if you walk by it and you see the house next door looks kind of similar, it was built for the assistant manager. So these are the two houses that anchored the mill village when it was constructed. So the last one this evening is a long overdue one, and this is for preservation leadership. So John, surprise, you're on candid camera. He's still processing. John has essentially been with the commission for close to 20 years, if I remember correctly, based on our discussion. It's a required position with the commission as architect. That can be a challenging position to fill because most smaller communities have a limited number of architects and an even smaller number that are interested in serving and that have the correct temperament and the time. And poor John, some point several decades ago, got shanghaied in and was very thoroughly used over the next few decades, so that when my position started, one of the first words out of his mouth were, "When can I resign?" And I made him promise to give me 2 years, and of course COVID hit in the middle of that, and he stayed for the 2 years to sort of try to get the program up and running with staffing, which I greatly appreciate. And I honestly, he was very instrumental in getting the position created, probably because he really wanted to retire at some point. And then we thank Jacob for taking the position over now. But John, thank you. And you've got to get up and get I know you do, and I really appreciate this, and I can just feel your enjoyment from here.
She's actually getting a lot out of this.
Now John knows why I asked him here tonight, because I didn't give him a firm answer on why he was coming. So, we love you. So we have one COA on the agenda this evening. Mr. Allison is going to recuse himself due to personal familiarity with the applicant. And this is 411 Walnut Street, Mr. Kennedy. The commission has asked me to go through this particular property with a fairly lengthy history on it. Mr. Kennedy was in front of the commission last year on June, July, and August for unauthorized construction of a brick wall in the front of his property. He did have an approved COA from the August 12th to construct a low brick retaining wall no higher than 12 inches in the same location as the pre-existing concrete wall that he had removed, which was an L-shaped running along the sidewalk and turning back at the front corner driveway. Mr. Kennedy did not follow the COA and was issued a second and third stop work order in July and August, respectively. It was appealed to council. Council sent him back to the commission. Mr. Kennedy returned to the commission at your April meeting of this year to propose exactly what had been built without an approved COA, with the proposed addition of brick fans on each of the transition sections of the wall. That COA was not approved by the commission. This is what the house would have looked like at the time of purchase before the work started. So this COA is a new COA showing what Mr. Kennedy is proposing for the site. He proposes leaving the base dimensions as currently built, and the height of each section varies. So just to walk, because everyone asked to see these images again. There's a timeline that gives you an idea of the scale of the columns. This is when construction stopped. This is first stop work order. And you can see there the grade difference. This was the June meeting where he proposed a full courtyard with a full 4 foot tall. The commission did not approve this. He returned in July with a modified plan. This did not pass either. It was amended to essentially, in case he really would not have removed the existing structure had he known, to allow him to essentially put this back in, but in brick if he preferred. And that's what was approved. He continued to work on the property and to not follow the approved COA, so second and third stop work orders were issued. Second Came back in front of the commission. At this point, you see dirt is being moved onto the site. In February of this year, he was with council to appeal the COA that the commission had not approved, which is this one here that was not approved. But what had already been built was beyond the one that was submitted. Council sent him back to the commission to see if a path forward could be worked through. This is what he had proposed last month, which is exactly what was built, and then adding some height. It did not pass the commission. These are the standards that the commission has referred to each time. There's also sometimes been discussion of the design not being appropriate, but then the commission focused back on design didn't matter because the terraced yard was not appropriate in this place. This is the current request. And I had some commissioners that wanted to understand the difference between this one and what was submitted and did not pass last summer. So here is the rundown between the two. The pier width is the same. The pier height varies. They're varying on it. The one last summer, the piers were open to be used as planters. This one, the piers have been filled with concrete. There is no specification for a cap or a top on them. They are just terminated with concrete fill that you can see. And then the one that was not accepted last summer had all brick walls on the front and the side at 13 inches high. This plan, they vary between 12 inches to 32 inches high. So this proposed design, portions are significantly taller than the COA that failed to pass in July of 2021, and portions of it are taller than what council looked at and had sent back to be revisited. So these are the standards that the commission has consistently referred to on this one. Sorry, I'm catching up with my images. And it should be noted that work has been continuing on the site, despite last week being told no more work can occur other than weeding, so it has been fully planted and leveled out at this point.
Yep. Have any more?
And I think I've got one more. Yeah, there's one more slide. So this is how it looked a few days ago. So, trying to remember the order because I don't have it in front of me, but Lynn, you do. Is it the commission asks questions
Well,
or is
the
it public
applicant.
comment?
I think the applicant.
Applicant. Okay.
Do you have anything further to say?
That's pretty much it. I mean, you know, I'm
You
lonely.
need to, he needs to come to the podium if
Okay.
he's going to speak.
I mean, you go back to the current picture. You know, I'm lowering this wall here, 7 brick, and I gave all the measurements. But as far as work continuing on it, yeah, I put some planting. I have a bunch of elephant ears that I just needed to plant. So, I mean, we planted the beds, but there's been no leveling take place. That's what we're hoping to achieve, is a level front yard. But this is all the same height and was approved. This area was not, but there's no way I can hold back dirt if I don't have a retaining wall there. That's been the ongoing issue. And then the brick wall here, you know, we're lowering it down. It's gonna be basically, I think, 14 inches above this area on each side. So that's really the change.
Okay. Do we have any public comment? You through? I mean, need anything more, Mr. Kennedy?
No, ma'am.
I need to get the clipboard because that has to be.
Any public comments? Ellis?
Yeah, 14 inches.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Wait till she gets back and then we'll,
We've got Mr. Chenault.
yeah. Okay, yes, if you, Mr. Kennedy, give me,
Okay.
take your mic from me for a minute.
I'm Ellis Chenault. I live at 417 Lion Street. I previously lived at 424 Walnut Street, which is almost directly across the street from this property. From what I understand, he just said he's lowering this. Is that correct?
Yes.
None of this was approved in the first place, so lowering it 7 inches is still out of compliance. This was approved for 12 inches, I think, and it's taller than 12 inches. So, to my way of thinking, to my sense of style, it's totally inappropriate to have a brick fence in front of a wooden house. It's totally inappropriate. But regardless of my feelings about that, it's totally out of square with the rules, totally. He's continued to work on it. He said he wants a flat front yard. I understand that. It wasn't that far out of flat to begin with. At one time, he said he didn't want it to wash. I lived across the street from this house. It has never washed. The house that I lived in has a huge, like 4-foot drop. It's never washed. That's just nonsense to me. He wants to have an area like this. It needs to go in the backyard. It doesn't need to be in the front yard. It will detract from the neighborhood and from his neighbors if it's allowed to stay this way. It's got to come back into compliance, period.
Thank you. Now, commissioners, Jacob, do you have any comments?
I guess my thing I don't understand is this new COA is not a whole lot different than what was submitted back in July. It's actually taller, July of last year. And well, I guess we have an amended COA that we did approve. And if things work could have done according to that COA, we wouldn't be here arguing about all this. And so I just don't understand how we went from an approved COA to where we are now.
No.
Microphone.
There's been no further brick work continuing on this property since the original stop work order.
The first one?
Not the first one, where
What happened to the first
you
two?
approved it, where I had the approval. That brick work continued, yes. But then when it wasn't within the standard, you come out and put out another stop work order. There's been no brick work continue on the property since that.
Have you filled dirt in it?
Fill dirt, no. I had some dirt delivered on, yes, but it's not been leveled, it's still in the pile that it was in.
Okay, all right.
But what's out there doesn't match what was approved by the COA. So at some point there was design
No,
changes, there was something that was,
The front part is 2 brick off, and, because I wanted it level. I don't want it to bump up across the front of the property. It goes from 12 inches on the right side, and the left side is 2 brick taller.
sure. I mean, I understand that it went taller, but there's a process that, you're supposed to come back before us if you have design changes, if you have things. You're supposed to get in touch with us and let us know before you do the work. And that's where we are right now. And based on what I'm seeing, I don't see anything different. What's there is inappropriate for your house and the property. So
Okay.
for me, I can't accept what's there.
Any Further comment?
I agree. Still out of, still out of guidelines, so still don't meet the
Barbara?
What's submitted doesn't meet the guidelines. I mean,
Right.
it's just,
And
Nothing
I
we can do
anticipated
about
this, so that's why I do want to just appeal it to the city council.
Okay. Bill, got any comments? Okay,
Excuse me, I do have one other question. Mr. Chenault chose to get up and speak. When he has a non-compliant column, and I feel that's why he's doing this, and I brought it to the historical board's attention, and it's never been addressed. But he has a 24-inch column that he did not receive permission from the historical
Carolyn, do you
board,
want
is
to
my
address that, or you want
understanding.
Phyllis to address that?
I can. He has a light fixture mounted on a brick post in the rear corner of his yard that matches the pre-existing front ones, and it was approved by a COA some time ago, because it's rear location and it's
So it's
a
not
light,
non-
it's essentially a light fixture base. Yeah.
So it's not non-compliant?
I'm sorry, it's not what?
Not
No,
non-compliant?
it had an approved COA.
Okay.
And the commission had asked, there had been discussion with the commission on, what are appropriate fence designs, because there's a lot of variation on what would, this house, because of its age, actually has a tremendous amount of variation on what could be done with it. And so I did reach out to some colleagues and pick some up. And so that's what those images are. The wood is the one on the left-hand side, and then the metal ones are on the right.
Okay, do I have a motion to
I don't-
approve?
Mr. Stone, did you ask Mr. Stone?
Yeah, Billy, you didn't have any comments to it?
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't
Yeah.
see him.
No,
I just didn't know if you had
Maybe
gone
we were
through everybody.
communicating this.
Sorry.
Okay, Bill, go. And he shook his head.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see
Yeah.
that. I just didn't know if you had any.
Do I have a motion to approve the COA?
I move to approve the COA.
Second? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, nay?
No.
No. Okay. Mr. Kennedy, the application is denied. I think you've heard the reasons, but it's basically, it's not substantially different than the COA you submitted on the July 8th meeting. It's about the same. There's inches here and there. And I think what we're going to deny it, which means you have a right to appeal. But we will not accept new COAs for this property until the property is brought into compliance. And the new COAs need to be substantially different from what you've already submitted and we've already denied. So this means complete removal of the retaining wall and associated fill dirt to return the site to its pre-construction condition. Alternatively, there was a COA approved July 8, 2021 to replace the front feature that you had originally, but in brick as you were requesting. This was a low brick wall, no more than 12 inches tall at the highest point and 1 brick deep to go on each side of the front sidewalk and along the sidewalk, a driveway side down to the house, with the same location as the existing thing. The brick will be no larger than the standard brick size of 8 inches long by 3 5/8 inches wide and 2 1/4 inches high with a standard 3/8 of an inch mortar joint. So you understand what we're denying the application and telling you, you must complete the work by returning the property into compliance within no later than June 9th, 2022. That's our next meeting date. If the property is not brought into compliance by this date, a court summons will be requested. Property has been in violation of the city's ordinance since the first stop work order occurred in May of 2021. The commission would welcome a COA that addressed the height differential of the stepped-up entry concrete pad to the lot with one that specifies removing the contemporary sidewalk pad and replacing it with one at a suitable grade and more suitable materials. If you've made comments about that. Wood picket fences and iron metal fences no higher than 3 feet are historically accurate designs, and they are also welcome. Any other comments on this particular item? Okay.
So my understanding, if I came back in and put fencing on top of this brick,
Not on top of this size brick. What we approved was, I believe it's
1 foot.
12
12
inches. On one side, you do have a slight
Mm-hmm,
slope, so higher, since you can't bend the
Mhm.
brick.
right.
Down the front and the garage side. No wall, as Ms. Schnapp pointed out, was never approved
Mm-hmm.
on the left-hand side facing the house. So if you wanted a fence, we would approve on where you had the existing concrete, being in brick,
Mm-hmm.
but it would have to be wooden picket or iron.
So the area that is 12 inches on one side is 12 inches.
Well, part of it is the depth of this thing. I mean, that's
The
part of it.
depth. It's
You have
one brick.
26-inch square columns. Now, this was the, it's a brick, the same location, brick would be no larger than the standard brick size, and, so it was never approved that you had the depth of what you've got here.
The columns were took down, so now,
The columns were not reduced in size, only
so if I take out
height.
the back part of that column,
It's still too high. I think we've denied this COA, so.
it's not,
Okay.
it's
The-
12
the-
inches.
The commission has denied your COA.
Okay,
So your options are to appeal, submit a new COA that is substantially different from this.
Will the specifications for that be spelled out in the letter that goes to Mr. Kennedy?
Let's fill that out, yeah.
So that should answer all those
As well as
questions,
the
yes?
deadline to begin bringing it back into compliance,
okay, the deadline was,
June 9th, 2022, around a month.
And the L-shaped 12 inches tall is compliant based on an
Right.
previously
We
approved
approved it,
COA.
Yeah, previously approved COA from July 8, 2021. And Caroline, do we have the exact in the
Yeah,
minutes?
and I will, that would go into a
Okay,
letter.
so
in the
she'll give you a copy of that.
okay, so if I appeal it, how does that affect the June 22? If it's in
It's still
appeals,
there.
I mean, when do I go before the city council? I
You'll go
guess,
before the city council if you decide to appeal, and you appeal, depends on when that is, when the deadline's for the agenda to be submitted. The city clerk can tell you what agenda it would be put on, I don't know.
the next one is the 16th of this month.
Right, there's a process there for when they have to add things to
Uh-huh.
the agenda for notice. So when you appeal, the city clerk should be able to give you maybe a ballpark of when it will be brought before council. I don't know exactly what date it would be.
So if the appeal is farther than the June, if it's to
I
the
think-
month of June,
We could stay the June 9th deadline if you have an
Make the
appeal.
appeal.
Right,
Oh, okay.
Pending the appeal.
that's what I just need to know, okay.
yeah, that's up to y'all, what you want to do, but you can do
I think
that.
we can do that. Okay. Caroline, what's?
The commission had asked for another picture of the front before work, so the reason the yard was being leveled is, and he did not put this concrete in, this was pre him. It did not like the drop off between, for some reason they raised this pad, and so that's what all the fill dirt was being brought in for. And so that was one of the things that the commission then responded to, that this pad could be removed. They would welcome something, if he wanted to remove that pad, put back the sidewalk at the level it should be at to approach the house properly. Fence designs. We actually have one more voting item on the agenda. This was on the agenda last month, and it was the voting to suspend streaming and the videoing of the HPC sessions. And the commission heard some testimony on it and then wanted to table it for some additional thought. So the HPC, at the request of the city during the pandemic, began having meeting sessions live streamed. This supported pandemic-related legal changes at the state level, which allowed commissioners to dial in without being present and have their vote count. The legal framework that allowed for that meeting flexibility has expired. The state has not renewed it, so commissioners can no longer dial in and cast a vote. Commission members have to be here in person. So the action requested is to suspend streaming. Commissioners asked staff to do some research on this. There is no requirement to do so. I checked with the IT department. The meetings aren't saved by the city, so they go on Lamar. You can correct me if I mess this up, but the meetings, they're live streamed, they're put onto YouTube, but the city doesn't hold them in a repository. So if they get corrupted on YouTube, if YouTube removes them, it's not like the city has these to go back into. It's just a third party is kind of holding them for however long they feel like holding them. I did reach out to the state and ask how it worked with other CLGs. Was able to reach about, I think it was either 14 or 15 in the state. Only 2 streamed their meetings. 1 recorded voice only, so they didn't do visual, they just did the audio. The rest, they're all public meetings, and they are legally required to be public meetings, and they are at set announced times. It's set at the start of each year, but the actual recording of them is not required. And I was also asked what other commissions and boards did with the city. It varies widely. Very large boards that review entire city, like BOZA and planning and ambulance board, those are all live streamed. Other ones that are smaller in nature, whether it's library, park and rec, personnel, they are not. So it's sort of a mix across the municipality.
Do I have a motion to suspend or continue? Either one.
I will move
The
to.
motion was, I'm sorry,
Oh.
I think it was to suspend because that's the way it was written.
Okay.
But if
Motion
it
to- do I
fails
have
to
a motion to
pass, then it
suspend?
continues streaming, if that makes sense.
Do I have a motion to suspend then?
I move to suspend recording of the HPC
Do I have a
session.
second?
I'll second it.
Okay. All those in favor of suspending, please say aye.
Aye.
Everyone raise your
Everyone,
hand.
let me make sure I get it right.
If you're
Count.
voting to
Everyone
suspend.
to suspend it, so in
suspend the
favor of
recording.
suspending recordings. Hold on, John, Jacob, Lynn, Bill. To keep streaming is Dodie. Am I correct on that? Okay, and Barbara to keep streaming. Okay. So 4-2, motion passes. Live streaming, unless we are told otherwise by the city, will cease at this point. Okay, let's see. Staff updates. COA compliance issues. The carport with Mr. Keenum, court summons was served. He is bringing his property back into compliance. He has, I believe, another month to do so. He and I have already discussed. I have reached out to Mr. Drury. You will recall he had the fence, and he has passed date on that. He has not responded. Would the commission like me to reach out to him again? And if I do not hear back from him, he's several months beyond. Would you like me to request a court summons on that one?
So,
Okay, so I'll reach out to him one more time and see. Tax credits, I was asked to look at another potential, actually 2 more potential tax credits this week. One since I wrote this up, one on Lee Street, another on Bank Street. So we will see if those go forward. Realtor Training, I attended a training put on by preservationists for realtors in Tennessee because I wanted to see what their program looked like. And it was interesting to see, and it was also really interesting because I was in the audience. I got to talk to the realtors afterwards to see if it was what they needed, if they felt like they got what they signed up for. And in some cases it was, and in some cases it wasn't, so that's helping me tweak what I'm getting ready to do with our realtor population accordingly. Had the advantage of, because it was a state-sponsored training, and it was outside of Nashville, so it had a very large reach. They had a massive historic preservation development firm out of Ohio come in that specialized in tax credits that were talking to realtors about that possibility. I made contact with them. They are looking at doing some tax credit projects in Alabama. They dropped one in Huntsville not long ago, but they're looking at one in Birmingham, and I have put them in touch with, Ellie Graham Thomas, of Decatur Downtown Redevelopment Authority, and we are meeting with him in a week or two to discuss possible opportunities for additional outside investment in Decatur through historic tax credits. And this is a firm that's responsible for redoing most of commercial downtown Columbia, entire blocks at a time. So this is a major firm, and this is what they do. You never know what I'm going to pick up when I'm at a meeting. He's talking, I'm like taking notes. Who is this person? I need to reach him. I also, the week before that, had attended a training session on trees and municipal law sponsored by the state Arborist Foundation and the state urban forestry. So I actually sat next to the head legal for the state's forestry department commission. So he got peppered with lots of questions. And they are working with Delano Conservancy as well, and the HUD, and y'all know this because I sent you all an email, is going to be at Delano Park talking about identifying distressed trees. The tree committee of the HPC has been asked specifically to attend that. I will be there meeting with Dr. Bowe, and then we will be discussing the historic district. He remembered having been here 10 to 15 years ago, going through the downtown, and as an arborist, what he saw going, wow, they have way too many overly mature trees that have not been properly pruned that are too close. So he asked what it looked like now, and I said, well, minus the ones the storms took out, pretty much the same. And he's like, oh, we probably need to talk about what that needs to occur. I had a very good discussion with the main arborist in Huntsville and with Mobile's arborist, both who've been offered to meet with me and offer help. Mobile's arborist does some consulting. We can follow back on that later. He might be a really good resource because as a municipal arborist, he's going to be very familiar with municipal reality when he is consulting on what is possible. Because there's sort of what's possible and then there's what's actually going to happen. And he's going to have a real sense being on the ground with the municipality of what that system looks like. So those were really good connections to make. Let's see, AHC, they have their grant program, the same one that we use to get funding for the Girl Scout Little House. They are opening it up again this year to organizations that own buildings that are educational in nature. So last year, the Little Girl Scout House received money. Also, Carnegie and Princess received. In the past, Old State Bank has received money.
We've received money.
Archives, yeah, y'all have received money. So that deadline for this year is the end of June for me to apply. They're very careful in their questions. They want to know if the application has received money in the last 2 grant cycles, because presumably they want to spread. They get far more requests than they have funding, so they don't want to see the same building coming back year after year. We've already done the Princess for 2 years funding. Carnegie's already been funded for 2 years. They're certainly welcome to apply again, but I've discussed with them the reality of what that means. They might have to sit out a year or 2. They do cover cemetery cleanup. One possibility is the Magnolia Cemetery, the Sykes Cemetery. That is something that they would pay for, and interpretive signage. So the city does not currently own it. I think it's been abandoned, but there has been some discussion of potentially, because it's been abandoned.
Have you been in on the Garth Cemetery discussion?
No, I don't think the city, I'm getting mixed responses on where that one is.
The council voted to accept it, but I don't think they ever, several years ago, but I don't think Herman ever moved on it, so I don't know.
Okay.
What the status is.
What I will probably, if the commission.
It would be a good use of funding.
Yeah. I think right now Sykes Cemetery has sort of come to the forefront.
Yeah.
And I think it's likely to be well funded because there has been the state is definitely focusing on underrepresented resources, and as a historically African American cemetery, that one has been underrepresented in resource allotments. I can ask the state if they will, apply for a grant and say if the city doesn't acquire the cemetery, maybe we'll have the ability to move that money to another municipal-owned building that meets the criteria. I don't know. I can ask though.
Sykes is kind of in a legal limbo there, isn't it? The city does not own Sykes, do they?
It would be, they would take possession of it.
Yeah. Okay, they just Like it's abandoned and
Yeah,
they just,
because
okay.
it's abandoned, yeah. So, and they might not, I don't know yet, because the council hasn't moved on it, but there have been discussions, and when I've been in on the discussions, I'm like, well, y'all, like, I can apply, but I gotta apply like in the next couple of weeks, and when you get these grants, you have a couple years to fulfill the grant obligations. So that would be more than enough time for, if the city acquires it, for the city to acquire it, and then for us to utilize the funds. If the city for some reason doesn't acquire it, then it would be, we have other projects and see, unless the commission thinks there's another project as a city, needs to be, for the city to apply, it would need to be a city-owned resource that hasn't received funding recently.
I think for the amount of money these grants typically are, that cemetery cleanup and just, I think that's probably an appropriate use.
What is programming? I mean, give me some examples that you might be able to apply for.
They aren't clear, and I've never seen a list of what they have done before. The fund is restricted, it says, sort of educational use or buildings. So I would assume for programming, it's things that they feel meet their educational standard, but I've never asked them what has been approved in the past. I'm sure markers would come under that, though.
Yeah, all kinds of signage.
And all kinds of signage, and I'm expecting, John, do they cover museum exhibits or not?
Not usually.
Okay, so they're not talking, so really it's more, maybe like a walking tour where you had a scan code and it would go into, and then pull data offline to tell you about the site. I would think for the Conservancy, if you meet the standards, that might be one on your tree identification database if it was made public, because that would
It's
be.
not a building, how can you, I mean,
I think it's educational program doesn't have to be tied to a building, does it? It's a historic resource. You could tie it to the park, though.
Yeah,
The park is an historic resource. So if
definitely.
it's within the park, so if
What
that's,
about Fort Decatur? Is there any small thing for Fort Decatur?
not that I have been told. We're holding off sort of to look at an HSR, because we don't really want to start work on a building until we know,
Historic structures.
yeah, what's going on with it. Any other possibilities, things I should explore? I'm going to assume that the Princess and Carnegie, I will talk to them, they will probably apply again, but how well the applications are entertained is just gonna depend on how many requests they get for funding.
When we got these, we just applied, well, no, it was City of Decatur. I'm trying to remember. I think those were all City of Decatur grants, but sometimes the Conservancy applies for things.
I'd still love to see that brick kiln done, but it's still privately owned, right?
If it's privately
Yeah.
owned, it would not, I don't think it would.
I agree with you there.
Yeah. I'm afraid that thing's it almost looks dangerous.
Do you think they would donate it to the city or the county?
I feel like if they had because they're not gonna tear it down, I don't think.
Who owns
Unless they're
it?
just, I think the people that own the marina.
The marina?
Yeah.
I believe it's on the marina property.
I would imagine
I
if
thought
they're
the
planning
city
on
owned the
keeping it there
marina.
anyway, they would like to see it fixed, they might just do
Lease
it.
it to, does Connor have it?
Yeah.
They just do a
The city
quick claim
doesn't own the
deed or
marina?
Hmm?
The city doesn't own the marina?
Not that one, not the Brickyard.
But-
Oh, okay,
Mhm.
right,
Not
So they're
Not
behind
Ingles.
It's
Yeah,
behind Ingles.
Brick.
okay, yeah.
What has happened to the Garth Cemetery?
A guy from Georgia has taken an interest in it and has done another cleanup and some monument work, but is on my advice and Phil Wirey's advice, don't spend a lot of money resetting the monuments because the same jerks that
Take it out
knocked them
again.
over before may just do it again. My thought on that is it needs to, if we can get the city to keep that drive clean so that, every once in a while, you never know, a cop might show up, or who knows, maybe there could be some money for a game camera out there or something to try to capture, license plates of people messing around out there. But, in a fence, there is a chain link fence around the historic stone and iron fence, but the gate has been, people really worked at it to get that gate open, bent the gate up. So restore that fence where it actually, you can put a padlock on it, and then whoever wants to visit it whoever is designated as the keeper of the cemetery can go and let groups in whenever. I don't know. I think there's ways to do it, but yeah, I don't recommend repairing the monuments. You know, people just go in there and just, as soon as we cleaned up the cemetery, they just went in and knocked them over. Someone tried to steal the statue, we think, the statue of the
Thought
angel.
they did steal the angel.
Well, they pulled it off. It's not on its pedestal anymore, but it's still there. It's just kind of on the ground, I think. But this guy has done a lot of work, and I think, I want to say maybe they've even considered doing ground penetrating radar out there to see if they could find other features. But it's, you know, the founder of Decatur, basically, the only one of the guys that was on in the original Decatur Land Company, the only one who stayed in Decatur, all the rest of them moved away, is buried there, Jesse Winston Garth. And there's, it's also a very unusual feature in that a slave is buried in the family plot. A slave named Charlotte is buried within the family plot. And then there's several other interesting features there. So it's one that somehow the council a few years back actually voted to break precedent and actually take ownership of the cemetery. Both the county and the city have been reluctant to do that in the past because it just opens up the gates of, you know, everyone wants their cemetery taken care of, you know, these little orphan cemeteries all over the place.
John, I
So-
seem to recall there was a state law that may have passed recently about requiring maintenance for abandoned cemeteries from the county or the city they were in. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know about
I was
that. I
trying to
know it's
follow
one
up on
that,
that. It's something that kind of passed by my periphery, and I'm not normally a cemetery person, so I didn't pay close attention
yeah,
to
it
it.
seems like I would have heard if it had
Yeah.
passed. It doesn't surprise me that one had been proposed, but you know, you have to imagine, you know, I think there's nearly 200 cemeteries, and a lot of them are just little, you know, family-owned things out there in people's fields, and a lot of them are, you know, I call them orphan cemeteries because no one owns them. You know, if you look on Amanda Scott's website, see, you know, it's just, no one owns it. It's just it's carved out, you know, and it's in someone's field, or it's by an old church or whatever. And so, unless there's a citizen group that forms a nonprofit to take perpetual care of the thing, it's just.
See, I thought the Garth family was gonna get involved. I remember them.
They
being
wanted to
contacted.
just, Winston Garth and Pensacola actually said, yeah, I'll donate it to the city, because he wants to sell the rest of the plot around it.
Well, that was on the plantation and it went huge.
Yeah, oh yeah. So, anyway, that was a digression, but it is a historic resource in the city that could be an educational thing if it ever happens.
Commission would like me to pursue that if I can.
But I like your idea about Magnolia Sykes Cemetery as well, because it's very significant with a lot of significant burials in it, and it's.
That one has been placed on the Alabama
Yeah.
Register.
Yeah, and it's more accessible.
And then the last thing under updates is just a reminder, so everybody gets their calendar, not next month, which is June, but the following month, July. The HPC meeting shifts forward a week because the time that we would normally be meeting is when NACP is doing their commission training in Ohio. And I will be gone, as will Rebecca and possibly some others. So make sure your calendars are marked. July 7th is the Thursday that we meet in July. And you all know I will send out 3 or 4 emails before then reminding you of that. Anything else?
Anything else?
Any questions?
Have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody want to stay here?